Okay, this video is to help people understand what this giant list is. We've added a couple new, actually 3 new proof standards to the list. So I thought it was a good time to maybe do a video on just kind of what each one of these things is used for, intended for, what they were developed, what problem they were trying to solve in the printing world. So let's get started. Before I get too deep into these, it's worth noting that Pantones are separate from GRACoL or SWOP or ISO. Pantones are essentially just libraries of color patches, swatches, and we can simulate those on a proof, no problem. I recommend, if you are using Pantones, really either the GRACoL coated or GRACoL uncoated if you have uncoated Pantones. Or if it's international, I would go with the ISO or the PSO for Pantones. But if you do have uncoated, even if it's international, I would probably go with the GRACoL uncoated, because this is an actual uncoated paper. Yeah, so I realize this list is a little big and can be a little bit daunting if you're new to this. So here we go. So we have 3 GRACoLs. These two are essentially the same. The only difference is the paper weight. The industry wanted to move to a more realistic paper weight that included optical brighteners, and that's essentially what GRACoL 2013 is. It's a brighter, bluer paper white that contains optical brighteners, which basically is in line with real-world production papers. They all have optical brighteners in them, so it didn't make sense to not include them in a proof. And that actually has to do with viewing conditions with your proof and your print, and I'm not going to get into that right now, but 2006 doesn't have optical brighteners. Back in the days of 2006, they were trying to avoid optical brighteners by not including them at all. But we still keep it around. It is one of the few specs that we have that we can run on the codec approval still, along with SWOP and ISO coded V2. We can all run those 3 we can run on the codec approval. The rest of the newer standards we're running on an Epson, the widest gamut Epson available, using the latest GMG color technology to deliver, the most accurate proof possible. Yeah, so GRACoL 2013, 2006, essentially the same idea. It's a coated stock, best case scenario, bright paper white, rich colors, rich blacks. That's basically what you want GRACoL for. These are all US standards. Actually, SWOP is as well, so these first 4 are US based standards. So if you have any commercial print project, be it a business card to wide format, this is basically what you would want. Packaging, etc. SWOP is also US standard, but it's really meant for magazines. A long time ago, this was kind of the de facto CMYK standard. It's still included in Adobe as like the default, which kind of boggles my mind, but yeah, it's really only intended for web offset magazines. It's actually what it stands for, Standard of Web Offset Press or Printing. So any kind of large run printed magazine or publication, this is what you want. So it's usually used for ad insertions. If people are running an ad in a magazine, they need to provide a proof, or they want to have a proof for their own use. That's what SWOP is for. Or if you're a retoucher and you're submitting a story to a magazine, you'd want SWOP. So next on the list is the ISO, now PSO proofs, aka Fogra 39 and Fogra 51. We recommend these for anything international. If it's Europe, China, South America, anything outside of the US, we recommend the ISO. It actually stands for International Standards Organization. So yeah, it's a safe bet when something is going overseas and you don't really know what they want. They're going to know what this is. It's kind of a known quantity. It's a standard in the rest of the world. So this is what you're going to want for commercial print projects, including Pantones. The difference between these two, this is essentially just like GRACoL 2013 and 2006. The PSO has the optical brighteners. The older Fogra 39 does not. So if you're not sure, go with the PSO, coated V3, the newer one that has optical brighteners. If you've got a client that has specifically requested the ISO coated V2 Fogra 39, obviously go with what they've requested, but if you're not sure, go with the newer one. Same would be true for GRACoL 2013 and 2006. I would, by default, go with the new one. Next on the list is Snap. This is basically just newsprint. So any kind of newsprint in the US, this is what you want. We do have a fair amount of people that are still using this, kind of surprisingly. But next on the list, XCMYK and ADobe RGB. Basically, these are what I would call wide gamut proofs. So you're going to get the poppiest colors using the full gamut of the printer that we're using. It's kind of like the best possible color rendition of your project if you don't really know how it's going to be reproduced in the end. So if you're a designer and you've got a print project, you don't really know where it's going. Maybe it's going to a wide gamut large format printer, go with XCMYK. This is going to have brighter blues, reds, yellows, etc. compared to the GRACoL. If you're a photographer or a retoucher, ADobe RGB, and all of your images are in ADobe RGB or sRGB, we recommend the RGB proof. You're getting the color accurate proof. It's kind of RGB to RGB. It technically isn't. It's RGB to a wide gamut CMYK printer. But this is going to get as close to RGB, Adobe RGB as possible with current printing technology. We're using the widest gamut Epsons, and this is as close as we can get to Adobe RGB. I don't have exact percentages of how close that is. RGB is light, CMYK is ink on paper that's reflecting light, so you can never get in a print RGB color gamut, so you can only kind of get close to that. I would say this is probably, just a guess, maybe 60% of the color gamut that you see in Adobe RGB. So if your monitor, if you're using a special NEC retouching monitor or an ISO that's hitting 97% of Adobe RGB, you can't expect that from a proof or a print because it's not a monitor, it's not light, it's light reflecting off of a paper. So yeah, basically this will, if you upload RGB files, this will give you the best rendition of those RGB files in a color accurate proof. The downside to this is there's really no standards for verification. So all of our proofs are verified to the spec. Every proof that we run gets read by a spectrophotometer to verify its color accuracy. We do that with Adobe RGB as well, but there isn't a standard, so it's just built on typical printing conditions on that particular printer. So if there's something wrong, like an ink is dropping, then it'll fail. But otherwise, there's really no standard. Whereas, as I already pointed out, with everything else, there's standards that we have to meet with that proof, and we verify that. So that's pretty much it. Any questions, feel free to give us a call. I'm always happy to jump on the phone and talk to existing clients, new clients about their project and which of these standards they want to use for it. But hopefully this video kind of gives an overview of the various proof standards that we offer. Thanks for watching.